Welcome, everyone, to the Pathways Research and Training Center's webinar today, Drop-In Centers as Low Barrier Engagement Strategy for Transition-Age Youth and Young Adults. I'm Emily TAYLRD, the Dissemination Manager for Pathways, and I want to start off with just a few reminders on how to use GoToWebinar. Everyone will be muted during the presentation except for our presenters, and we will have time for questions at the end, so please type those in, and we will have a posting of this webinar recording and presentation available soon afterwards on our website at the link shown. Today's webinar, again, is Drop-In Centers as a Low Barrier Engagement Strategy for Transition-Age Youth and Young Adults, and we're really happy to have our presenters today. They are authors of two of the articles in our latest focal point. This is the annual magazine from Pathways. This year's theme is the evaluation of innovative transition programs, and that is, of course, what we'll be hearing about. So first will be Massachusetts YouForward program, represented by Betsy Eads, the program director, and Wendy Mancia, a peer mentor with the program. And after that, we will hear from Kentucky's TAYLRD project. Kate Tilton, the TAYLRD project director, and Will McFeeters, a peer support specialist, will tell us about their program. And with that, I want to go ahead and pass it to Betsy.
Good morning or afternoon, everyone, depending on what part of the country you're in. We're going to talk to you a little bit today about YouForward and share with you three main things. The first is kind of our program model. The second is a little bit of information about who we serve. And then the third are really the ways that we have engaged that population through using low barrier access strategies. Next slide, please. So our program model has four kind of primary components. The first is drop-in centers, and these are really places young people can come in, walk through the door, find things they want and need. And they're a very nice community for our young people, so a lot of people don't have a lot of friends or social connections outside of these areas. And so it's a place people come in, they feel welcome, and they're a pathway into services. Next is our individualized support services. So these are TIP, Transition to Independence Process, or wraparound. Wraparound Enhanced with Achieve My Plan is what we use. Those are both really targeted to transition age young people, and they lead with goals and where young people would like to get to in life. And we always give young people a choice in terms of what types of services they think would work best for them, which they feel like would be the best approach, and who they want to work with. We also offer a recovery and employment class for young people who have made some kind of progress towards their goals, and they feel like they might be about ready to enter the workforce, or they've expressed interest in becoming a peer mentor. And this course is a 70-hour time commitment, so it's significant, but it really helps young people tell what we call their comeback stories and reflect on what they've been through and how they've overcome challenges. And it also helps them get ready for the job, to work a job and get out there in the workforce by helping them write a cover letter, develop their resume, work on their communication skills and things like that. And then finally, we do a lot of youth leadership, which is really critical for our young people who are forming their adult identities and really trying to figure out who they are in the world and what they want to do and what their strengths are. Next slide, please. So we focus on young people aged 16 to 25 with serious mental health concerns who are somehow falling through the cracks, and that can look like a lot of different things. So it can be young people who have left school without completing it, young people who don't have parents who are particularly involved, or who have tried to get therapy and it hasn't worked out for whatever reason. The systems just aren't quite working for them. It can also be young people who have gotten involved with the wrong types of systems, so they're involved with the legal system. We, in addition to that broader group of young people, have specifically targeted Latinx young adults, LGBTQ young adults, young people experiencing homelessness, and young parents. And I want to show you a couple of slides about our engagement with those populations. Next slide, please. So just to kind of demonstrate that we have, through using these strategies, really achieved reaching our target populations, almost 60% of our young people identify as Latinx. And I want to say that we have really found that a lot of the forms that we use with SAMHSA, or just our general mental health forms, when people go into offices, don't really work for our young people. They don't feel like they see themselves in the demographic categories listed. And so I think that's always worth thinking about when you're designing a program and you have control over what is on the forms. We have seen, since we started really targeted activities for our LGBTQ groups, we've seen an increase from 17% to 37% of our young people identifying as LGBTQ. Next slide, please. We've also successfully reached a lot of young people who have or are currently experiencing homelessness. At this point in 2018, we found that 72% had experienced homelessness at some point in their lives. Not all of them were currently, though certainly a significant number, and another significant number are experiencing housing insecurity, meaning they have a place to stay tonight, but they don't know if they can be there next month. We also found that we were engaging with a lot of young parents. And those parents had themselves been involved with the Department of Children and Families as children often, and they were also involved, their children were involved, and so they were seeing that system again as parents. Next slide, please. So I think when you're kind of talking about young people who are maybe falling through the cracks or who often just experience disparities in services, the question is, well, why is that? What's happening that isn't working for these young people? How are our systems not meeting their needs? And that, I think we all see these barriers all the time in the work we do, where we require payment and they can't afford to pay, or we're speaking to them in a language that they don't speak, meaning we're speaking in English and that's not the language they speak, or we're speaking in language that is jargony or maybe works for adults but sounds really unfriendly to young people. We're applying labels that they don't feel like fit them, be that demographic labels or diagnoses. We're asking them to do lots and lots of paperwork, which is the last thing that they want to do, or they don't really understand the paperwork or why we're asking them to do that, and it feels really dehumanizing. We're asking them to keep appointments, which they don't have the skill set to track yet, or they don't have the car to get to, or they feel really stigmatized by the programming or services that are offered to them. So there are a whole slew of reasons that young people don't access the services, and we really looked at ways we can eliminate as many of those and kind of cut through as much of the red tape as possible. Next slide, please. So I want to share a little bit about what low barrier access looks like and how we really have started to make it easier for young people to come through our doors. So drop-in centers allow young people to walk right in anytime when they're ready. They don't need an appointment. They don't need to bring anything or do anything in advance. If they're not able to come to us, we'll go to them. So we sometimes get calls from the emergency rooms or from schools, and we will go out and meet the young person in that environment so that they don't, sometimes they haven't even really thought that something might be available to support them. But when someone shows up and says, hey, you're homeless, I could help you find some housing, they're very interested in that. We keep our eligibility criteria very, very simple, and this is for a couple of reasons. One, it means that our partners can understand and they are very clear on who is a good match for our services and who isn't. It means that they're able to connect the young people that we're looking to reach. And it also means we don't have to spend a lot of time asking ourselves, does this young person qualify for our services or do they not? We're able to assess that in the moment right away and kind of get started with them immediately. Our four questions are they in our age range? Do they live in our service area, which can be a little bit complicated if they're homeless? Do we hear evidence that they are experiencing a mental health concern? And then are they somehow falling through the cracks? If it's a young adult that already has access to a therapist, they live in a house with supportive parents, they kind of have all these things lined up, they're usually not a young adult that we're going to offer our core services to. We really like to reserve those for young people who haven't had access to those things. We don't require them to have documents they don't have. So we don't require an ID, we don't require insurance, we don't require medical records. And that is something that really is prohibitive for a lot of our people. They don't have a driver's license or they don't have a photo ID and they don't really know how to go about getting it, or they frankly can't get it. Or maybe they have the medical records to prove that they have a mental health issue, but they don't know where they are, how to go about getting them. We also never have a wait list. So our services might get full, but we are always able to serve a young person and get them started on their goals in the drop-in centers. And we keep our paperwork to a minimum. So when young people do come through our doors, we really try to be focused more on having a conversation and getting to know them rather than on filling out a large volume of paperwork. So we've really reviewed what is often required and eliminated a lot of it and gone with only what we really need. Next slide, please. I should add that when you see these purple boxes on the bottoms of the screen or wherever on the slide, that these are things that our young adults have said about our program. We really try to give our young adults voice whenever possible, and so having some quotes from them is a way to give them some voice in this presentation. These quotes were from focus groups that were done by our evaluation team a couple of years ago. So another part of low barrier access is really knowing who we hope to serve. So these are those 4 target populations that I talked about before. And I think if you're not really clear about that, you often end up overlooking young people that that are really important to get out there and outreach to. So being clear about who it is, you know, what community are you in, who's there, who do you really need to focus on reaching because the other service systems aren't getting to them. And then being very intentional about aspects of your programming and things you're doing to really engage that group. So making sure that you are offering things in the right languages, doing activities that are of interest or providing the supports that meet the needs of those young people. And I'm going to pass it over to our now youth coordinator, Wendy, to talk a little bit about how we've done LGBTQ young adults.
Thank you, Betsy. Next slide, please. All right, so today we're going to be talking about how we engage LGBTQ. At YouForward, we have staff that identifies as LGBTQ, which is essential because this automatically makes young adults feel comfortable to approach us with anything they may need. The LGBTQ community is normalized in this space. Other young adults embrace their identities and pronouns and are very respectful to one another. As part of our welcome process, we provide forms for young adults to fill out. This form asks young adults how they prefer to be identified as, and also includes the pronouns they prefer to use. Most public spaces do not have these options for them yet, so seeing these options in our space make them feel comfortable. Staff supports and reminds others to use correct pronouns if needed. At the drop-in, we also have an LGBTQ support group every week, and to give us exposure, we go to high schools and recruit students to our group. We are also connected to the statewide AGLI network, in which we can recruit new members and get new ideas to bring to group. For the next slide, I'm going to pass it on over to Betsy. Next slide, please.
So we want to talk about creating a welcoming environment and how that really eliminates barriers. So our drop-in center spaces have things young adults like and need. They have a lot of decision-making power about what's in those spaces, and that started at the beginning. So we asked them about what they thought the drop-in center should look like and what things were important to prioritize, and we were looking at spaces to rent. And so we have things like a kitchen and a shower and laundry. We also have colorful walls in some of the spaces and things like that, and it makes it feel more welcoming and less institutional. We have peer mentors on staff, and Wendy's going to talk a little bit more about that in just a minute, but I think the staff team is a very critical thing to consider. So in addition to having peer mentors who bring their own lived mental health experience to the table, we really ensure that our team is representative of the young people we're trying to reach. They speak their languages, they understand their culture, and that goes a long ways to making young people feel like, hey, I really do have a space here and I'm going to be understood. We focus on goals and really lead with the positive. So instead of saying, hey, tell me about your symptoms and let's get really into your diagnoses and your history, we really start with a forward look and say, where do you want to get to? And then we work on the stuff that isn't going so well or that is challenging as we're working on getting to those goals. We really look at our young adult as leaders, and we encourage them to view themselves that way. So from the minute they walk into the door, we're inviting them to be part of our Youth Leadership Council. We're asking them once they get to know us a little bit to give tours or to be representatives. We just had a state senator come out, and we really asked them to take the lead in giving the tour and in talking to that person about the program. We use approaches that are restorative and not punitive to address conflicts and problems. We want those to come up in our drop-in centers. It is part of life, and our job is to really help young people learn tools to navigate those situations. And so it takes time and energy, and it's not always easy, but instead of telling a young person, oh, you got in an argument here, a fight happened, you can't come back, we really work with young people to address the impact that had on the community and to make amends and to work on strategies for reintegrating into the community. And then we have fun. And I think that can sound like, oh, what's really happening if you're just playing a game of cards? But the answer is a lot of things are happening for our young people. They are learning about social interactions, and they are making friends for possibly the first time in their lives or the first time in a long time, and they're connecting. And so I think that's a really critical piece is, if our young adults are having fun with us, they're going to come back to do more work with us later. Next slide, please. I'm going to hand it over to Wendy to talk about peer mentoring a little bit.
All right. Thank you, Betsy. So as a peer mentor, my role was to truly just inspire hope. I also used my own lived experience to connect and support young adults. A lot of young adults seem to think that, once we become adults, our life is perfect. And I get that a lot here. And once I tell them the reality of what I personally went through in life to be here today, they automatically gravitate to that and have a sense of comfort knowing that I was just like them once. Next slide, please. So on this next slide, I'm going to talk about engaging young adults through leadership. So at our drop-in, we currently have a video game tournament that has been completely youth-led and very successful. What inspired us to create this event was the shy, unengaged young adults. In connecting with these young adults, we found out that they truly love video games and had an immense knowledge of the games and the systems. That's when I thought to myself to make this event completely youth-led. In making this event completely youth-led, it works perfectly because young adults are recruiting and connecting with new members every week. There are even times that they don't even wait for us to get the event started. They just do it all on their own. Next slide, please. And this slide is just quotes from young adults. Feel free to read as I pass this on over to Betsy.
Thanks, Wendy. Next slide, please. So pivoting from how we have done low barrier access a little bit, in the registration, there were a lot of questions about steps for starting a drop-in center, which could be an entire separate presentation, but we did just want to include a little bit about the steps we took and what we thought was particularly salient. So the first thing I would say is get your young adults involved as early as you possibly can. We had young adult leaders helping us for months before we opened our doors initially, and they really helped us, as I mentioned before, with the space and the location and what things should look like. They helped us design our name and logo. They helped us get in touch with other young adults and really got us thinking about a lot of important aspects of the programming. Partnerships are crucial in terms of identifying your young people and really making sure you offer services. If you will find, or at least we have found, that we have space here, and a lot of people need that space to do things that they want to offer. We also have young people in our space, and a lot of people have this service they want to offer, but they don't have the connection to the young people, and so they are happy to come in and use our space and provide us and our young people with services at no cost. The location is hugely important. Most of our young people do not have cars, and they rely on public transportation or our staff team to get them to the drop-in center. And so really finding that central location that's easy for young people to get to, that is accessible to young people. So if you have young people who are handicapped, you really want to make sure they can get into the building. You want to be accessible to all of your young adults. And then also just making sure it's in a neighborhood young people feel safe going into, in buildings that don't feel stigmatizing and that feel welcoming to young people. And then also I would say just jump in and get started. I think at some point I've seen people get really bogged down almost in the planning and spending too long in that phase. And your young people will teach you a lot as you get going. And we found that our young people played a huge role in really forming the culture of the space and making sure that it's a positive, welcoming environment. Next slide. So if you'd like to reach out to Wendy or I, would be happy to talk to you more about drop-in centers or low barrier access. And I'm going to pass it along to my colleagues, Will and Kate from Kentucky.
Good afternoon or good morning, depending on where you are. Thanks for having us today. My name is Will McFeeters. I'm the Youth Service Coordinator here and Peer Support Specialist. And I have with me our amazing Project Director, Kate Tilton. And we're going to talk about TAYLRD drops in Kentucky and just a little bit of research and data that we've collected from our Louisville drop-in. And I'll go ahead and give it to Kate to start us off.
Thanks, Will. Next slide, please. So like Will said, today we're just going to give you a snapshot of our drop-in centers here in Kentucky and just a little bit of the data that we've collected around homelessness. And so Kentucky, like Massachusetts, we were awarded a Healthy Transitions grant in 2014. We focused on increasing access to behavioral health services and supports for young people. And we initially started with 4 drop-in centers in our state. And actually now we are up to 20. Next slide, please. So what TAYLRD works to do is to impact the lives of 16 to 25-year-olds in our state who are either at risk of developing a behavioral health challenge or have an identified behavioral health challenge. And our focus is really on increasing access to care for them. Next slide, please. So a few of the ways that we do this is we employ youth peer support specialists with TAYLRD. We focus on offering a variety of different services, supports, resources, and activities for young people. We connect young people to what they want based on what they have chosen rather than what providers feel like they should get. And we also work to make sure that they can get quick and easy access, again, to the services that they have chosen. We also work to reduce the stigma for young people around behavioral health services. Next slide, please. With TAYLRD, we view drop-in centers as engagement tools. Next slide, please. So a TAYLRD drop-in center, like we said, it is an engagement tool to offer young people services and supports that they're interested in. Our drop-in centers, they're staffed by behavioral health professionals. They reduce barriers to connecting to services that they want. They're in youth-friendly spaces and youth-designed spaces. And then they're helping places that assist young people with reaching goals that they have identified. And like Massachusetts, we use AMP+ process to help them identify those goals, as well as motivational interviewing. Next slide, please.
Okay, and I'm going to talk a little bit about the Louisville drop-in. And when we first started, at a baseline, only 13% reported living in an owned or rented house, apartment, trailer, or room. A lot of the young people who were homeless visited the drop-in center, and housing was a pressing need. And we had to figure out what it is that we could do about it to help these young people get housed. Next slide, please. Okay, some of the services that we have provided to these young people experiencing homelessness is youth peer support, which is another part of my job. That's someone that has lived experience. I've experienced homeless myself, and having that experience is also a good way to connect and support youth that have those same issues. We offer supported employment. Helping them find jobs is really important. A lot of them do not want to get jobs while homeless, but helping them and supporting them throughout the process and ensuring them that, becoming an adult and becoming a stable adult, that you have to have employment is very important for them to know. We have supported education, therapy, case management, medication management, transportation assistance, addiction services and aftercare support, leadership opportunities, career planning, and life skills training. And here at our Louisville drop-in, it's kind of like a one-stop shop. We provide peer support special services, case management, medication management, leadership opportunities, transportation, and therapy, where they can all get it in-house. Next slide, please. partnerships. Building partnerships within the community is very important. When running a drop-in center, you're going to need that extra support from the community, and you're not going to be able to offer everything once you first open a drop-in. So being out in the community and doing some research and doing some outreach is very important. Some of our partners that we've listed, the Coalition for the Homeless, they're more so a partner that helps us with on the street young adults that are fresh off the street, that are staying in the homeless shelters out in the community. The Home of the Innocents, they're more so a foster care related program. A lot of our young people have grown up into the foster care program, and through the Home of the Innocents, they're able to get housed and connected to the right resources, as well as Youth Spiritus. They're also a foster care and True Up. Now our HUD housing is more so independent living and on income based as well. Next slide, please. Our youth experience things in response. These are just some of the things that the clients have said about coming to TAYLRD, that it's a supportive environment, that the staff are very caring and nice, that they enjoy being able to have access to mental health services within the center and not having to be always outsourced or referred to other agencies, which we do that as well. If we're not able to meet their needs, it's very important to do the research and go out in the community and find where they can get help. We also provide them food, a snack when they come in, and then a dinner later on in the day. Next slide, please. And if you want to take a second and look at the quotes that some more of our youth have said about TAYLRD. Okay. Next slide, please. And what the data shows from our Louisville drop-in, as I said before, overall at baseline, 13% reported living in an owned, rented house, apartment, trailer, or room at 6 months. This proportion increased to 31%. So overall at baseline, 64% reported to be homeless. At 6 months, this proportion decreased to 39%. So over a period of 6 months, more people were housed, more people had jobs, more people were creating stability for themselves. And it was because of the services that we have provided here to support them to be able to do that.
Next slide, please.
Next slide, please. And I'll go back to Kate.
So a few things that we've learned through opening our drop-in centers, and what we have is just a kind of a process before new drop-in centers open. First, we assess the community for readiness, and we also assess the level of youth engagement in the community. So we do that through surveys and through focus groups. We make sure to include community partners, young people, and their family members before we even start with the first steps for a drop-in center. Like I said, we hold youth focus groups in the community. We choose a site location based on young people's input and community input. And then we design the look of the site, the engagement tools, and programming on what the young people have indicated that they would like. And then we work with young people and community partners to plan for sustainability, and we start doing that from the very beginning of the process. A couple other pieces to our drop-in center model. We do have a membership process, so when young people come into the drop-in center, and just like Massachusetts, anyone can walk in off the street during our open access hours and check out the space, and they can come back a few times before they decide whether or not they want to be a member. And we have that membership process in place for us to make sure that we're serving the population of young people that we're wanting to, and that we also know who is in the center, and then that all of the young people coming in, that they're assigned a youth peer support specialist who will be working with them on the goal that they've identified that they want to achieve. So by that third or fourth visit, we have young people decide if they want to become ongoing members. And then also just another point about our drop-in centers, like we said, we have behavioral health service providers in the drop-in center. Part of our sustainability in Kentucky is that many of those services are Medicaid billable in our state. And so even though we are offering some services that aren't billable, and we're also serving some young people that are not choosing to get connected to what we would think of as traditional services, we're still able to keep the drop-in centers sustainable and still have that extra programming, and also have young people that don't fit that kind of box where they're going to connect with traditional services. So next slide, please. So what we found the most important piece of opening a drop-in center and keeping it going and sustainability is that you include young people at every stage, from the very beginning to even ongoing quality improvement, that you treat the young people as equal partners around the table, that if you're having implementation meetings, that you have young people there and they're treated as just equal members of that team, that you start youth councils or advisory boards, and that you have people and processes in place to support young people in trying to develop their leadership skills, and that you have also things in place to be able to train and prepare young people to serve as leaders, whether it's in the agency, their community, or the state. So things like public speaking, participating in meetings, or working as young professionals. And Will is going to talk a little bit about youth leadership here at the Louisville Drop-In Center.
Yes. Okay. So at our Louisville Drop-In Center, at some point in the past, it had got a little hectic. And if anybody knows how a drop-in center goes, nothing ever goes perfect. There's always problems that arise and difficult tasks that arise. And a lot of times that comes from the youth not having a voice. And them having a voice is very important to the functioning of the center and the progress of the center as well. So we had came across a point where we were understaffed and things were getting very stressful, and we had more clients and we had more workers, and we had goals for our clients that they needed to reach. And a lot of our clients were distributing those leadership qualities, but in order for us to acknowledge that and to collaborate with them, we needed to create a team. And with that being said, we created our Youth Advisory Council. And how we came about that is we gave the clients here an opportunity to elect who they felt were leaders amongst their communities and amongst themselves. And we had an election, and everyone voted on who they felt that their leaders were. And we came up with a president, a vice president, treasurer, ambassador, and a secretary. And each of these roles entails different tasks that may, help us out at the center as far as staff-wise. Just some extra leadership skills that can be used to help throughout the day to keep the center functioning properly. And some of those tasks may include like menu prep, preparing the menu for the week. They volunteer to help clean up. Some of them help us with clerical work, like printing out worksheets for group activities, coming up with actual group activities. They give tours to the new guests that come into the center, whether it be a client or just someone coming out the street wanting to know what TAYLRD is all about.
And one thing that the Youth Advisory Council did recently, they helped to host an open house at the drop-in center, invited community members to come in, learn about the drop-in center, And they also had a state representative come and hear their stories and learn more about the drop-in center, youth homelessness in Louisville, and really led that process for that open house.
Yeah, so it's very important to keep the youth active in what's going on at the drop-in because their voice is vital to their success as well. And another thing that we just did, we just had our prom. They wanted to have a prom. They came up with the decorations, the themes, the list of activities that we were going to do, and it was really exciting and very fun for them. So, and a lot of them, had goals that they were working on in the process of trying to make this prom happen. So, to be able to complete their long-term goals, like one of the guys, he completed his high school diploma during the process. So, and he also won prom king. So, that was really a great success for him because he's been working towards that for 5 years. And to be able to have prom and then win prom king because he's never experienced the high school life as he wanted to. So that was really exciting as well. And for him to be looked upon as a leader and not really have felt like a leader was amazing. It was an amazing experience.
So next slide, please. And you are welcome to contact us. We're always happy to talk to folks on the phone just to answer questions or talk a little more in detail about our tailored model here in Kentucky. Thanks.
Thank you, Kate and Will and Betsy and Wendy. We're so happy to have all of you here. And we do have a little more time than we might sometimes for questions, which is great because I know there are a lot of questions related to this topic. So it'll be nice to have a little extra time. And I'm going to kind of let you decide who might want to respond first. We have one, how can we maintain the focus and stay motivated in a young adult's interest on a short-term goal? They say there has to be a stable mentor engaged in their life. Are there services that provide this kind of stable mentors? Young mentors who don't quit on kids who are testing boundaries. Any thoughts on that from any of you presenters today?
This is Kentucky, and I guess, and that was a lot. So I'm thinking the one related to keeping them on track with goals. We use the AMP Plus process out of Pathways RTC to help young people identify and work on their goals. And we really like that process because it's a very youth-friendly process. It encourages empowerment for them. And then we also train staff in motivational interviewing so that they can help to partner with young people in identifying their goals rather than telling them what they think their goals should be.
Yes, and the peer support role is to support that as well, and check up on the client and make sure that they have realistic goals that they can reach, and make sure that those goals are being talked about on a regular basis, and that there is some type of follow up as far as getting that goal complete.
Excellent. Betsy and Wendy, anything you would like to add on that topic?
So a couple of thoughts. One is that I think we sometimes need to do a lot of work as a staff team on making sure that we don't get burned out and kind of like too low energy to work with our young people, because it can be really hard when you are working with a young person and putting lots of energy in and you feel like, oh, I just spent all this time and then they're not interested anymore. They're not doing what I feel like they should be doing. And we really have to work with staff and with ourselves around that, and how we kind of like keep in mind that this is about the young person's process, and help kind of explore with that young person then, like, hey, like what happened that it seems like you're not interested in this anymore? Like, do we need to switch it up? Is the approach not working? Sometimes we will find the young person isn't connecting well with a particular staff. If they have a primary service staff that isn't a good match for them, we'll just switch it up. Or if for some reason that young person is having some conflict with that staff for right now, something they're feeling like they're not getting the advice or the support they need from them, there are other people on the team they can go to. Wendy was also just pointing out to me that we found it to be really important to make sure our young people are connected to multiple people on the staff team, because we really want them, if say their primary support does leave, to have other people on the team that they feel connected to, or if their primary support person is away on vacation, or something's come up with them, and that can really help the young adults stay engaged through a transition. Which is a little bit of a side, but I think it's worth noting when you're thinking about young people who and that very precious connection we form with them.
Absolutely. That's great. Thank you very much. We have a question about membership, which I know Kentucky you mentioned specifically, and Massachusetts you have kind of some kind of eligibility criteria you confirm. So the person wondered, does a membership choice result in a more formal intake assessment? Is there a step later on?
Well, and I would say in Kentucky, because we've been a part of the Healthy Transitions grant, with that there is the NOMS, a federal outcomes tool that we perform with young people if they choose to participate in that. So that ends up being part of the membership process, that they're offered that. Other than that, there's just a membership application where we're getting just some basic information and starting that conversation about thinking about a goal that they might want to work on, and then also doing a brief assessment just to make sure that they're not currently in crisis or emergency.
Thank you very much. And Massachusetts, anything to add about sort of the drop-in and regarding formal intake assessment things?
Oh, sorry. I think we have similar requirement with the NOMS to Kentucky, although we only do NOMS for young people who engage in our core services, so the TIP or wraparound. If they're just coming into the drop-in center, we don't typically do a NOMS with them. We really do try to keep it very limited in terms of the entry process. So we have those 4 questions, which we don't even directly ask you. We get to those as more part of a conversation with young people. We have what we call a launch pad. So it's a 1-page form that we fill out with young people. As Kate mentioned, we do really want to make sure that no one is in an immediate crisis or any sort of immediate danger. And then we also really want to get a sense of what's bringing that young person through the door. What do they want to work on with us? But we try to keep it really minimal in terms of process.
Excellent. Another question about how do you handle youth who fall outside of your service criteria? Anybody want to take that one first?
Well, again, with Kentucky, and we can talk a little bit about the young people that come through our doors. I think with our grant, we were lucky enough that we're able to serve young people who are at risk of developing a behavioral health challenge. So that really opens it up for us, that we are able to open the doors to young people to walk in, to use the space. Now, if they sign up for membership, every young person is assigned a youth peer support specialist to help them work on that goal. But if they choose not to, or are not in need of some of the more formal services like therapy or medication management, then they don't utilize those. Will, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, it's all up to them if they decide they want to use the services or not. We don't force anybody to get services here. A lot of our members here want the services, so initially going through that 3 or 4 days of coming and getting to know what it's about, what services we have offered, what we can do to support them is very important during that membership process. However, if they choose that they don't want the services, they're still able to come, they're still able to engage with the community, use some of our engagement tools. Like we have a laundry facility. If they need to come and wash clothes, that's available to them. If they need to come get a snack or something to eat, that's also available as well. So we don't want them to feel like that there is just no support as a young adult at all, but we want to offer them those services if they feel that they're needed.
Excellent. And Betsy or Wendy, did you want to add anything to that?
I wanted to add something to what Will just said, which is that we found a few times that we had to be very intentional about the choices we were making around the fact that our services are purely voluntary, because we would have, maybe a PO or the court want to send a young person to us, which we would of course welcome, but then we would also really have to say, like, that's great, we would love to have this young person, but we'd love to have this young person if that's the choice the young person is making, and we won't report back to a PO or a judge or anyone about whether or not that young person is using the service, unless for some reason the young person wanted us to do that. But we won't be kind of required in that way. In terms of young people who maybe don't meet our criteria but are showing up at our doors, we can't serve a 35-year-old. We will really do everything we can to connect that person with services. And in some cases, when we've come upon people who are really struggling and don't kind of have anyone else there that's helping them out, we will even assign our clinical director to really spend some time working with that person and going out and really getting them connected, taking them to other resources and getting them connected with those resources. So we try not to turn anyone away because of because we're specifically looking to go out and find those people who haven't been well served by services. The last thing they need is when they are showing up at a door is to hear, like, actually, you don't qualify here. So we really try to be careful about that and make sure we're connecting people to something that they will qualify for and that they can access.
That's excellent. Another question here that relates to billing. In starting the drop-in centers, prior to billing for those participants who are on some form of medical insurance, did you initially begin the centers without billing in order to determine if the center would work? So maybe if each of you could sort of discuss or respond to that billing question.
And we'll go first. Just briefly, we got TA and consulted with Youth Move Oregon, which is Youth Era now. So we looked at their model, and the Medicaid billing model is very different in Oregon than it is here in Kentucky. We have fee for service, but we were able to start our drop-in centers again because we had the Healthy Transitions grant. Now, what I would say is that the Healthy Transitions grant, we had said in our application that we would open 4. Once we opened those 4, we had other community mental health centers from across our state that then were interested in doing the same thing. So we've had basically 16 other drop-in centers open from community mental health centers that did not have that funding. But again, they were then able to get TA and support from us on kind of lessons learned and how do you do this and how do you get this started. And they also had an investment and a belief from their agency, from their community mental health center, that this was important, that they knew that they would be investing on the front end, but that they wanted to do it.
Mm-hmm. And I think as far as billing goes, once the grant runs out, we are required to sustain the center by billing. So with that being said, we're constantly doing outreach. We're constantly recruiting new clients to keep that flow going in as far as billing wise, so that we don't lose the center due to billing. So it's important that if you don't get that funding, that you do start billing when you open your drop-in, so that way you'll have some type of sustainability throughout the time that you have it.
Thank you. And Betsy or Wendy, did you want to add anything?
So we did pilot billing a bit as part of our, explorations into sustainability, and we found that it was very difficult to work within the model we use, and just in terms of our young adults actually being able to meet all of the criteria. So we feel like it might be a way that we can bring in a little bit of funding to support drop-in centers, but it's not the method we have chosen in terms of primary source of sustainable funding.
Great. Okay, this question is specifically directed to the YouForward team. How do you measure outcomes and manage health issues without collecting much baseline data through paperwork?
That's a great question. So we don't collect much through paperwork. We do over time get to know our young people though, and we also do the NOMS, the National Outcomes Measure, and we accompany that with a secondary like quarterly survey we do, and that has given us some data because ultimately we did have to have some outcomes data to be able to make a good case for ourselves sustainability wise. And so we really worked with our evaluator on developing a way to do that that wouldn't be too invasive to our young people.
Excellent. And Kentucky, do you want to add anything about measuring outcomes?
Again, like Massachusetts, we use the NOMS right now. We do use the NOMS with everyone who does decide to sign up for membership, but everyone that decides to sign up for membership is assigned to a youth peer support specialist who will be checking in with them. But yeah, that's how we do it.
And we also do baseline surveys as well because there, we have to follow up with crisis, follow up with goals, and we have to ask the young people, how do you feel that we're doing as far as helping you accomplish your goals? How do you feel as far as suicidal rates or just anything that we can ask them that can give us data? We do it at least every 2 months, because it's important to keep information flowing and knowing our progress as well, and just trying to create a great functioning program.
So yeah, so like Will said, a lot of youth focus groups where we're getting some of that information too.
One person asked if clients with intellectual disabilities are eligible for service at your drop-ins. I don't know if they would be, or if you would be looking for other places to refer them to.
No.
Yeah, and I'll say for Kentucky, for all the drop-in centers, what we say is that they need to be able to operate independently in the drop-in center without like a personal assistant with them. So the nature of the drop-in center, although we have staff on the floor, make sure staff is able to watch the center at all times. Everyone that is going to sign up for membership needs to be able to be here and operate independently. That's kind of our rule of thumb, is what we say.
But we don't disqualify them for having a disability.
Right. Right. It kind of be a case by case.
Case by case.
Great.
I think in Massachusetts we do something similar where we there's no reason that would disqualify them. They would have to meet our 4 eligibility criteria still. So being in the age range and in the right living in the right area and having a mental illness. We also would say that we can't provide like one-on-one staffing for someone in the drop-in center. Although we have had young people that will come in with a mentor or a support person of varying types, and that's fine with us. We just ask that those people are kind of mindful of the drop-in culture and environment. And frankly, we've never really had an issue with that. We find that people are usually able to just kind of blend in or fade into the background. And we do serve some young people that have various disabilities, and it's worked out quite well. And I think a few times it's actually been a resource when young people are kind of getting stuck between systems. So mental health and developmental services are kind of trying to figure out where someone should get their support, and that can take some time. We have gotten calls saying, hey, can you support this young person until we figure this out?
Great. I know a lot of people are really interested in kind of the day-to-day routine, and Will, you mentioned that it really varies, but one person asked how many young adults attend a drop-in center on a typical day. So maybe you could each kind of answer that.
Specifically at my drop-in, it's anywhere from 10 to maybe like 25 people day to day. So that's usually I would say our numbers start to decrease the hotter it gets and the colder it gets. For some reason, the hotter and colder seasons, we don't get a lot of clients or members, I guess, because of the weather. But here lately, the numbers have picked up a lot. So
And do you want to talk about the hours that you're
And
open?
the hours that we open are from 2 to 5 p.m. It's open to the community by appointment from 10 to 1 p.m.
Great. And Wendy or Betsy, do you want to talk about that too?
Sure. So we find attendance swings quite a bit. We average between 12 and 13 young people a day. But we find that some days, if the weather is really horrible or something else is going on, sometimes we'll have 5. And then if we have something that's really high interest going on, we'll have 25. If we have something like a graduation or a big event, we might have 60. So it fluctuates quite a bit. Interestingly, we had a pretty significant emergency situation here last fall that I think is worth mentioning, just because it really gave me something to think about. So we had some gas explosions. It was a national news story, you may remember, in Lawrence, that significantly impacted the community. Like, we had a lot of people who were not able to live in their homes and were living in like trailers for months in hotel rooms. And you would have expected that like our service numbers would shoot up dramatically during that time. And we actually found that we had fewer what we call invites to services. And I really did some reflecting and thinking about like what is going on with that. And kind of the only thing I could come up with is that our partners were kind of so overwhelmed and busy that they actually just weren't, that like none of us were seeing new people. And that was a really like an interesting thing to think about in terms of like sometimes when there is a dramatic emergency that impacts the community, how do you really make sure your individual services are getting out there and able to reach the people that need them when there's kind of this huge overwhelm within the community?
Yeah, that's great. We have a couple more questions I hope we can get to. Someone says, from what I'm hearing, the peer support specialists are the best fit to have in drop-in centers. Does a youth coordinator also play a role? So maybe talk about the sort of staffing structure.
Yeah, I'll let Will talk about that. He is both a youth coordinator and a youth peer support specialist. So you can talk about maybe the difference and the need for each of those.
Yeah, the center is pretty much peer ran. The peer support is first point of access when they walk through the door. They should be greeting the client when they walk through the door, if there's not a youth counsel available to do so at the moment. And just peer support kind of keep an eye on what's going on, what's needed around the center. As far as youth service coordinator, my job is to coordinate the activities that we do here. Like I hold groups a lot. I do anger management groups, depression groups, arts and crafts, independent living skills, teach them how to cook, things like that. Those are more so what the youth service coordinator would do, and taking the clients out into the community to do grocery shopping or to get grooming done, those type of things. Peer support can do that, but peer support is more so needed at the center, while everything is going on, because it's peer ran. So with that being said, the youth service coordinator does the more personal, individualized tasks as far as working with the clients and the overall functioning of the center.
And then I would add to that, Will, in his youth coordinator position, also does a lot of leadership development with the young people. So he may be coaching individual young people to sit on a council of some sort, or to speak in front of a group and doing like a strategic sharing training with them. So youth leadership support too.
Yeah, and youth service coordinator also attends like conferences, a lot of meetings, and a lot of community action stuff involved. So it's very different in roles.
That's great. Wendy, would you like to add anything, or Betsy?
Yeah, sure. So I definitely agree with Will on that. In transitioning the role, the main thing that I realized is that peer mentor is like more one-on-one with that connection. The youth leadership is more engaging all the young adults in the drop-in at the same time and building that one-on-one connection at the same time, but also getting their input in order to apply that to events here. And I think that's I would think that's the main difference on those roles.
Wonderful.
This is Betsy. I would just add, I think the youth coordinator, I think it has a lot to do with how you structure the roles within your program. But for us, the youth coordinator has really played a very significant role in kind of like coming to meetings with decision makers and sometimes bringing young adult participants to those meetings, helping prepare young adults to sit in those meetings, building that leadership like Kentucky mentioned. And then also sometimes really when we don't have young adults, serving as someone that can really bring that voice to the table in a powerful way.
That's great. Thank you all so much. We have hit the end of our time today. I want to thank all of our presenters for the wonderful information and your time in preparing, and thank you to all of our attendees today. I want to remind you that we will be posting the presentation and recording of this on our site, and I hope you will also look for an email asking for your feedback on the webinar. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.